The Forerunner. The mysterious godlike race that built the fabled Halo rings. They sacrificed everything to stem the tide of the Flood and give life in the Milky Way galaxy a chance to rebuild and thrive. Who were they? The history of the Halo universe is long and storied, spanning back millions of years to the creation of life in this galaxy. These epic tales of struggle and hope are still being created and retold by people like me. Subscribe now. Bungie and 343 have made some missteps with regards to the lore, but I think one of the biggest mistakes was making the Forerunner a separate alien species. So today, let's talk about why the Forerunner should have been human. The Halos, for which the series is named, are beautiful, self-contained ecosystems, which seem like an oasis of life floating in the harsh blackness of space. But their beauty is deceiving. The Halos are weapons so powerful that were the 7 rings of the Halo array to be fired, the entirety of sentient life in that galaxy would be killed. When playing the first game, it was strongly implied that humanity was once the ancient Forerunner, and they built the Halos as a desperate weapon against the Flood. They would sacrifice themselves and all that they were to stop the Flood's apocalyptic onslaught. Apparently, I was mistaken. Later games and stories would reveal that the Forerunner were a highly advanced race of aliens, and while the humanity of that prehistoric era was orders of magnitude more advanced than humanity at the time of the games, they still paled in comparison to the full might of the Forerunner. Here's why that wasn't a great move. During the first trilogy, Forerunner technology was clearly coded and designed to be used by humans. When the UNSC Halcyon-class cruiser Pillar of Autumn found the Halo ring designated Installation 04, her crew and, more specifically, John 117, was mysteriously able to make use of the Forerunner technology. The firing of a Halo even requires a human to unleash the deadly blast.
Unfortunately, my usefulness to this particular endeavor has come to an end. Protocol does not allow units with my classification to perform a task as important as the reunification of the index with the core. That final step is reserved for you, Reclaimer.
A Reclaimer? Here? At last! We have much to do! This facility must be activated if we are to control this outbreak!
Even more curious was the dialogue from
I am 343 Guilty Spark.
the AI tasked to be the guardian and caretaker of Installation 04. There are a number of lines where Guilty Spark talks to John as if he is the Forerunner.
But once the others follow suit, this galaxy will be quite devoid of life. Or at least any life with sufficient biomass to sustain the Flood. But you already knew that. I mean, how couldn't you?
Left out that little detail, did he?
We have followed outbreak containment procedure to the letter. You were with me each step of the way as we managed this crisis.
Chief, I'm picking up movement.
Why would you hesitate to do what you've already done? You are the child of my makers. You are Forerunner.
Hell, he calls humanity,
Reclaimer. Inheritor of all they left behind.
as in reclaiming the technological legacy of their ancient selves. After all, you don't reclaim something which was never yours in the first place. Columbus didn't reclaim the Americas in the name of Spain, since it wasn't theirs in the first place. If Spain wants to be reclaimers to America, they're gonna have to get through the American military. Counter-arguments to the implications made during the first trilogy are plentiful, and not wholly unconvincing. The tech, and more specifically the ability for humans to fire the Halos, well, maybe our hands and Forerunner hands are just the same shape. Maybe before the Forerunner exiled themselves, they keyed their technology to be accessible to humans once we redeveloped ourselves to a sufficient level. Guilty Spark treating humanity as if they were Forerunner? Well, we are the heirs to the Forerunner, and the term reclaimer can be less reclaiming Forerunner technology and more reclaiming our former greatness and honor, which was stripped away from us during the human Forerunner War. Also, Guilty Spark was likely rampant by the events of the first game.
Unacceptable! Unacceptable! Absolutely unacceptable! Protocol dictates action! I see now that helping you was wrong! You are Forerunner! But this ring is mine!
And probably delusional as well.
Last time you asked me, if it were my choice, would I do it?
I don't know though. It just seems that if we have to do a bunch of mental gymnastics to recontextualize and show how the Forerunner were always a different race, maybe that's just bad storytelling. I mean, if it's just about humanity reclaiming our lost greatness as a galactic power, then the San Shayum could also be considered reclaimers, as they rebuilt their civilization into the Covenant. I mean, what's done is done. 343 did take us down the route of the Forerunner as a different species, and they're not doing a terrible job of it, but it's just so clear that the Forerunner were meant to be human. I think the benefit of ancient humanity as the Forerunner would be one of narrative and thematic richness. Look, Bungie wasn't really subtle with their religious allusions. Flood, Halos, Ark, Covenant? I'm kinda surprised they didn't make John Hispanic and name him Jesus.
Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
But these were all superficial terms used for the same reason that Evangelion used Christian religious imagery. Christianity is metal. But had humanity been shown as the ancient Forerunner, I think the religious imagery would resonate more strongly, as well as providing a stronger overall message for the franchise. The Flood and Ark are clear references to the story of Noah. Obvious reference is obvious. The story of Noah is one of humanity reaching a level of arrogance and violence which was an affront to God. As punishment, he brought down a flood to cleanse the world. Righteous Noah was forewarned by God and allowed to save himself, his family, and the innocent animals of the world. Boarding an ark built by Noah, they survive and eventually rebuild the world. It's all right there! 343 introduced the concept of Geash, which are mental patterns which could be implanted into the minds of other beings. What if Noah's Ark was more than a story, but a genetic memory and warning from the time humanity, its wrath unchecked, fell? After all, almost all human cultures have a version of the Flood myth. It was a final message from our ancestors to not be dicks. Humanity, at the height of its technological and evolutionary development, became vain and debauched. They reject the precursors, here a stand-in for God. The precursors, in a final vengeful strike, incarnate themselves as the ravenous flood and slowly spread across Forerunner territory. Humanity, realizing the enormity of their folly, creates the Halos to stop the flood from spreading beyond the borders of the galaxy and becoming a blight upon the universe. Noah, a righteous Forerunner, or even a class of Forerunner, construct the Ark and assembles a catalog of species from across the galaxy to reseed their worlds with life. Ultimately, the firing of the Halo rings would be an act of redemption for humanity. They would sacrifice all life and themselves now to allow for life to continue in the future. Here's why this makes for a better story. If the Forerunner are a separate alien species, then the UNSC and humanity at the time of the games aren't really atoning for anything. They're cleaning up someone else's mess.
I've got rocks that need washing at home.
Yes, ancient humanity did play a role in the original Flood outbreak, but at the root of everything was the Forerunner's arrogance and folly. We're innocent and are paying for the sins of others. This sends the message that humanity was always the more noble race and should have been in charge, not the Forerunner. But that attitude and message is exactly what we shouldn't be saying. That's what got God, or the precursors, pissed in the first place.
God is pissed.
As George R.R. Martin is fond of saying,
the human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. I think that's true of all fiction, of literary fiction, such as Faulkner wrote. but also of science fiction and
The Forerunner, as human, gives us that eternal struggle. It gives us the message that humanity can learn from its mistakes and grow as a people. It's also a better Aesop about the dangers of violence and wrath, that our technological hubris can bring our downfall. Humanity as Forerunner would be able to take those themes of darkness inherent in the human heart and set up riveting plotlines. Onis slide into paranoid power-mongering and attempts to create order in the universe, similar to the ancient Forerunner. We'd now have stories of humanity's fight not only against aliens, but against ourselves and our propensity for dictatorship and tyranny. We could see how the former Covenant races react to finding that humanity are the Forerunner they have worshipped for millennia. How do they reconcile and atone for killing so many of their gods? Some would undoubtedly reject their religion outright. Others would try to worship and be servants to humans. And there would undoubtedly be humans who take advantage of this, starting cults dedicated to themselves as a member of the godly Forerunner. These cult leaders assemble armies of former and faithful Covenant species to their banner. What would that mean for galactic stability? There were just so many interesting plot lines that could have been had if humanity had been proven Forerunner. It's just so frustrating that the game and story devs at Bungie and 343 didn't go this way. I mean, what can they really do with the Forerunner from here on out? Basically rehash the Didact conflict? Forerunner returns from exile and tries to reclaim the mantle of responsibility, and humanity has to fight him. It feels so empty. It doesn't really tell us anything except that Spartans are strong. The former Covenant? We'll continue seeing stories about our conflict with the various splinter groups. But again, it all feels so empty. Instead of a complex story of religious zealotry and selective religious beliefs in the face of what should be faith-shattering events and manipulation by religious leaders, we get angry and still religious Covenant who wanna fight. Go get 'em, Spartans! The best pieces of science fiction are ones that give us insight into the human experience and show us a way forward. It lets us contrast what we are with the possibility of what we can become. Not just technologically, but morally. Our development as a species.